part of the evening I've been dreading the most. First of all, Jill, thanks for such a wonderful introduction. And I'm honored and moved by all the wonderful things you've said, and I'm not going to quit my day job because I'm not so good on the screen. You and your family are the benchmarks when it comes to philanthropy, and I want to thank you and your family, Leslie and Gordon, your sister Laurie, and the Diamond Foundation for believing in our hospital and for starting such wonderful programs. You're visionaries, you are bold, you give to programs that have changed women's lives, not only in our city, but in our province. I know Stephanie Rowan and Stephanie Fisher are here running the surgical daycare unit, which has changed women's access to surgery, not only the surgical programs, but the NICU, which you've supported, and also for sitting on the hospital board for 7 years. That goes above and beyond, so thank you. Thank you for believing in our hospital. This is a very good room, and thank you for all coming out tonight. And everyone cleans up nicely, especially that table there with the Matthews and Chetna group. Please excuse my notes. I still have most of my hair, but I've lost a lot of my memory. And they say never underestimate the importance of a good head of hair. Apparently, you miss your hair more than your memory when it's gone. So I'll use my notes. First of all, a few thank yous. Thank you to all of you who've shaved your legs and put on really tight clothes for tonight's event. That's the men in the room. The men in the room I'm referring to. And Doug and Lana, for those of you giving up your Michael Bublé tickets to be here, I know you're regretting that roundabout now, aren't you? To all of you here tonight, you have donated your valuable time and you've come to great expense to share in the celebration. Thanks for making this evening such a resounding success. I know you've been thanked before, but I want to thank the GLOW committee again, both professional and volunteer. You have worked tirelessly for a full year in order to make this GLOW Gala a reality. This night belongs to you. And after 2 years of no in-person gala, it's just wonderful to be with everybody and schmooze and to see who's put on weight and who's lost weight, and you're looking good, you're looking good. To my darling and amazing wife, Natalie, for being both in front and beside me on this incredible journey. You're the love of my life, you're my rock and my North Star. Having spent so much time away from home on call, you've essentially been a single mother who has blessed me with 3 slightly better than average children. Trust me, 3 slightly better. One of whom is here tonight and the other 2 are still on my payroll. I am both so honored and a little embarrassed to accept this prestigious award. Looking around the room, I see some of my colleagues who are truly giants in the field of women's health. Being recognized in their company is both humbling and a great honor. My journey here tonight starts in a dentist chair, but not as a patient, but as a third-year dental student. There I was, just having given my patient some local anesthetic, not into his gum, but by accident through his cheek. And all that it did, it made a wet spot on his tweed jacket. And that's true. And as I struggled to see his lower back molar, and I think he only had 1 molar left, I had this epiphany. It was a real epiphany. I saw myself doing the exact same thing 30 years on. And it was such a jarring epiphany. And this is true. I excused myself. I stood up. I walked out of the dental school, crossed the road into the faculty of medicine. And I met with the secretary and I said I was almost a dentist and that I think I'd made the wrong career choice and I really wanted to be a doctor. Why dentistry, she asked me, and I answered that when I was in grade 11 and starting to plan my career, I'd asked the wisest person I knew for his sage advice on career choice. That turned out to be my best friend's 21-year-old brother, he was a medical student, and he said to me, he said, do dentistry, Mark. It's good earnings and no night call. And looking back, he was 100% right. So why medicine? I was asked a few minutes later, and I was going to say that I fainted the sight of money, but I gave a more convincing answer. And so it was very fortuitous. They said, good news, just happens that we have an extra spot in third year medicine. Someone has dropped out to pursue a career in finance, and all you have to do is to pass the physiology exam, and we'll give you their spot. When I got my letter of acceptance to medical school, my mother, who worked as a sales assistant in a clothing store, cried. My father, a traveling salesman who grew up in an orphanage, who had been working since the age of 15, also cried. Then he shook my hand and looked me square in the eyes and said very seriously, so son, how old are you going to be when you do an honest day's work? My first day as a medical student on the obstetrics ward went as follows. I heard a woman in the throes of labor shout, "Doctor, doctor, come quick, help me, help me." And I ran into the ward to find her lying on her back with the baby's head already delivered. Never having seen a delivery before, I did the only thing I could think of was to shout at the top of my voice, "Nurse, nurse, come quick, help me, help me." That was 37 years ago, and 20,000 babies later, and trust me, not much has changed. After completing 2 years at medical school, I was conscripted to the army to do 2 years of national service. So I decided that it was smarter for me and for the country to leave rather than to stay and fight. I had never heard of places like Manitoba or Saskatchewan. And I remember asking a friend of mine who was working there at the time, who had come back to South Africa, I said, what are these places like? And he said, and this is true, he said, Mark, it's so flat you can watch your dog run away for a week. So on Good Friday 1990, I left from my mother-in-law's beautiful 6,000 square foot house on half an acre with a swimming pool and a sauna and a wood-burning pizza oven. And 3 days of travel later, I arrived in northern Manitoba in a place called Gillam. It was spring. It was a balmy minus 30, and the snowbanks were 14 feet high. I thought it was the middle of winter, but April's the middle of spring. Being a doctor, I got special perks. I got a double wide trailer. I got a Chrysler K car with all-season tires, a Parker from the Hudson's Bay catalog, and a pair of size 14 Sorel boots that had been passed down from one South African doctor to the next. So my orientation to life in the north was given to me by the head of Gillam Hospital, and his name was Gary. He was the head nurse. And he said, Mark, the 3 things that are likely to kill you up here are as follows. He said, 1, the cold, and it's minus 40 for a very long time, so always dress up warm and never lick anything metal when you go outside. So what do you think the first thing I go do is, right? 2, polar bears. And he said to me, if you've never seen one, they are large white animals with a little black nose, and they weigh about 2 tons. And if you ever encounter one, make sure you just can run faster than the person that you're with. And this one you're going to like. He said, Mark, you've got to watch out for the snow snakes. And I said, what are snow snakes? And look, I'm from South Africa, so I'd never heard of a snow snake. Just in case you're wondering, there are no such thing as snow snakes. But he said, Mark, you've got to watch for snow snakes. They only are found in northern Manitoba, and they're extremely dangerous. And what you have to do is when you walk in the snow, you have to stomp really loud and clap your hands and shout at the top of your voice in order to scare the snow snakes away. So after my orientation, I go back to my double-wide trailer. And I get called 2 hours later to come to the emergence. I walk out of my trailer and had to cross a big field. And so there I go, stomping and clapping and shouting, stomping and clapping and shouting, looking for the snow snakes. When I walked into the emergence, I saw Gary and the 2 nurses bent over double, holding their stomachs, howling with laughter. Rob, this was for you. So seriously, why obstetrics? And this is the second most commonly asked question, is what made you choose obstetrics as a career? And the answer is simple. I didn't choose it. Honestly, I didn't choose it. It chose me. After working up in northern Manitoba for 3 years, I had shoveled, I had slipped on and buried myself in as much snow as I ever wanted to see. So I decided to apply to a residency program away from northern Manitoba to get me out of this misery. I was offered only 3 choices. The first was pediatrics in Halifax, internal medicine in Edmonton, even worse. Sorry for anyone who's from Edmonton. And thirdly, obstetrics in Vancouver. So, well, the person you have to think is Dr. Saul Israel. Saul, where are you? I phoned Saul. Saul's a good friend of mine. We went to high school together. I called Saul because he was living and working in Vancouver at the time, and he said, Mark, Vancouver, you don't need snow tires. You can golf from March until November, and the clincher was you can go running in short pants all year long. I'm not a runner, but if I was, you would go running in short pants. He clearly forgot to tell me about the rain. He didn't tell me about that. So I chose my life's career in obstetrics based on the criteria of weather alone. That's true. I started my residency at BC Women's Hospital on the 1st of July, 1991, and I haven't left the building since. So that's the second most commonly asked question. What is the most commonly asked question I get asked, aside from how did a guy like you land up with such an awesome wife? The most commonly asked question is definitely, after delivering so many babies, is every delivery still so special? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. I wish there weren't so many between midnight and 4 a.m., but to bear witness to one of life's greatest miracles never gets old. It's not only the physical act that is so overwhelmingly impressive, it's the relationships that build as a result of the birth, and that's the reason why most of you wonderful people are here tonight, that is so impressive. When you have delivered someone's child or grandchild, you become an integral part of their lives and their families forever, and I really am aware and appreciate that. After almost 30 years in practice, I'm starting to deliver the babies of my babies, something which is immensely satisfying, but making me feel very old. I want to sort of change direction a bit and talk about my medical school training in apartheid South Africa. I firstly must acknowledge and accept responsibility that I am a doctor based on the privilege of being white. I am confident that if I were to apply to medical school today based on merit alone, there is no chance I would have made it past the first round. My internship in apartheid South Africa exposed us to the victims of violence and oppression, as well as all the other maladies like TB, malnutrition, and poor access to health care that can make living in the third world such hell. It was also the start of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, which went on to ravage the continent. It was the most terrifying time for patients and for caregivers. But hard times often bring out the very best in humanity. And some of my fondest memories of that time are of the church choirs who came to the hospitals on Sunday to sing for patients. And despite their incredible hardships, these people were still joyous, and they sang and they danced at every opportunity. On the shoulders of giants, many great people have had a profound impact on how I practice medicine, as well as how I conduct my life. In spite of all the hardships we experienced while living and working in South Africa, we also witnessed great acts of kindness, courage, and compassion. Like my chief of medicine, who always carried a bag of oranges with him to give to patients when they were discharged so they would have something to eat on their long bus ride home. And the nurses and pediatricians who, during the height of the anti-apartheid riots, drove through roadblocks of burning tires, risking injury or death in order to ensure that some of the most unfortunate children on this planet got their scheduled vaccinations. Then there are my colleagues here in Vancouver, many of whom are in the room tonight, who have made Women's Health Centre a centre of excellence. When I started in practice in 1995, there were only a handful of women in our group. Today, there are only 2 males left in our group, I being one of them. The rest are 23 wonderful and accomplished women. I've had the honor to train many of these exceptional women, and now I watch in awe as they juggle the responsibilities of being mothers, wives, busy clinicians and researchers whose work is published in world-renowned journals. I only have one of those roles to fulfill, and I can't do that well. The importance of kindness and compassion. This part's hard. Remember in the beginning of the story, I spoke about having to pass the physiology exam in order to get into medicine. It turned out I actually failed the written exam. I had only 4 weeks to study an entire year's work, and I landed up with 48%, and the pass was 50. When it was time for the oral part of the examination, I had Professor Graham Mitchell as my examiner. I remember the question he asked me. It was about vitamin D metabolism. I was so anxious and I was so nervous, I went completely blank. I couldn't say one word. But Professor Mitchell saw my desperation and he decided to help me at that time. He went on to answer every question he posed me and then asked me if I agreed with him or not. And needless to say, said, "Yes, Prof, I think you're right." He ended up passing me. It was that moment in time that changed the course of my life forever. That single gesture of kindness and compassion is why I'm able to stand up here before you tonight. I want to recognize and give thanks to him for the profound impact he has had on my life. Every day, I try to repay that incredible gift. Never underestimate the importance of being kind and generous. One seemingly small deed can change someone's life profoundly. I'm pleased I didn't put on mascara. I now want to talk about mature women's health. So why am I, someone who's made a career delivering babies, standing up here tonight, pleading the case for mature women's health? It's because my wife, our friends, and most of my dear patients are now mature women. Fertility and childbearing get a lot of attention, but the time after that gets very little or none at all. Most women will spend more time beyond their childbearing years than in it. Where's Kerry? Kerry, my dear friend, when she heard about tonight's gala, asked me, "So Mark, what exactly is mature women's health?" And my immediate response was, remember when you'd go to the pharmacy when you were younger and you got Advil and cold and flu medications and that was it? Remember there were all those other shelves that you never had to, there were all those other shelves that you never had to use. Well, mature women's health are all those other shelves. It deals with the challenges of cooling some things down while trying to heat others up, making things softer that have gotten harder and trying to make things harder that have gotten softer. To keep certain parts wetter and others drier, to be regularly regular, to reverse the effects of gravity and remove those things that have grown in places where they shouldn't be grown. To keep the arteries opening, the mind sharp, the libido up, and the anxiety down. Mature women's health is not only about living longer, it's about living longer and living better. From a health perspective, women are pretty much bulletproof. Exactly. They're bulletproof until their mid-40s. After that, we know that they catch up to and often surpass their male counterparts when it comes to bearing the burden of disease. Not only does their death rate climb, but their quality of life deteriorates dramatically. And I just want to give you a few examples. Breast cancer, unfortunately, is going to affect 1 in 8 women in this room. Women are twice as likely as men to develop osteoporosis and life-threatening bone fractures. Women also undergo 2/3 of all knee replacement surgeries, and believe it or not, there are still no gender-specific knee replacement devices on the market. Twice as many women compared to men are diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and almost 2/3 of Americans suffering from Alzheimer's disease are women. The number of these women dying of Alzheimer's is now greater than all women dying from breast cancer. Didn't know that. Heart disease is still the number one killer of all women. Every 22 minutes in Canada, a woman dies of a heart attack. Both scary and sobering, isn't it? There are many other issues which may not kill, but can make mature women's quality of life miserable. Menopausal symptoms, mental health issues, addiction, sleep issues, sexual health, urinary incontinence, to name but a few. From a personal perspective, I'm married to a brilliant woman who also struggles at times with issues related to mature women's health. I now have insight and compassion when she asks me, "Why do you keep on turning the air conditioning off?" And are you sure we've seen that movie before? But the toughest one to answer honestly is, do you think my dress shrunk in the dryer? Getting better at that. Mature women's health is probably for every woman, their partners and families, the single most important health issue that will predict not only how long they live, but the quality of years that they live. Women should no longer be invisible in their mature years. We need to build a program at BC Women's Hospital, a program whose entire focus is to look at the challenges of mature women's health. We need the researchers, the clinicians, the nurses, the equipment, and the facilities to house this program. It is time to be bold and to make a commitment to help kickstart such a vital program, a program that is very much overdue. We need to put our energy and focus towards achieving this goal. Remember my story about how one small deed changed my life. This is your opportunity to make that difference. Women deserve it. We can do it. Let's get it started. Thank you.